Hello friends, I am Indrani Das Sharma, Associate Professor in Jhulelal Institute of Technology, Nagpur. My today's topic is environmental disaster and its protection. I take this opportunity to thank Shri K. M. Nandyal sir for helping me in preparing this lecture. The flow of my today's lecture would be introduction followed by pollution and its effect on the environment, various environmental components, legal coverings, industrial disasters, and finally conclusion. The idea of this lecture is to provide an insight to what is meant by environment, how it is facilitating the existence of human being. When imbalance is created in this fine tuned ecological system, certain types of problems can get created. The intention of this lecture is to create awareness about what these imbalances are and how to deal with the problems therein. This aspect is known as environmental disaster management. Environment is the surrounding that all living and non-living things are exposed to. It can be natural as well as man-made. The natural environment incorporates all living and non-living things occurring naturally, that is those that are not man-made. The environment also includes the fine interaction of all the living species, climate, weather and natural resources that affect human survival and economic activity. This environment which surrounds us can get disturbed either due to natural activities or also due to created situations which can in turn lead to a disaster. Natural phenomena like tsunami can create havoc probably even decades after the event. As seen in the screen, the sea wave surging inland can destroy the agricultural land, rendering decrease in its productivity, or volcanic eruption or landslide can create havoc in the surrounding areas, making the settlements vulnerable. However, this is not limited to natural events or incidents alone, but we human, due to rampant urbanization and industrialization, have threatened contamination of the environment. With 386 chemicals being used in various industries, the situation can be really grim. The above factor leads us to a situation wherein either due to natural or man-made reasons the environment can be so disturbed that it creates a disaster which even though cannot be avoided, but can certainly be controlled in its magnitude provided we understand the implications in advance and plan accordingly. Now, let us see how our activity actually influences the environment. Anything that is undesirable is a pollutant. For example, the wheat flour, which is a basic requirement because of our dietary requirements, is beneficial to us, but if a person is exposed to wheat flour in excess, then he may develop some kind of respirational disorders or maybe allergy. The pollutants can be broadly classified as natural and man-made pollutants. Natural pollutants are caused and produced naturally and will be problematic for considerable time since agropotential activity may get hampered. The man-made or artificial pollutants on the other hand have huge impact on the environment and in turn on us. The increase in population has made us dependent on various environmental factors which are available, but they get polluted and at times become dangerous due to our developmental activities. The pollutants contaminate the environment by entering into it. The environment has potential to cleanse itself, but for a limited period of time. Now, let us consider the case of our water resources. For instance, river Ganga. This is the lifeline of our country. The Ganga, after leaving the Himalayas, in its due course passes through various cities, settlements and industries on its bank. The sewage of these settlements, effluents from the industries are dumped into the river. The river, which is considered holy, has self-purification capacity, albeit it is limited. The situation is further aggravated by the effluents from the leather industries when it passes the city of Kanpur. All this taken together has drastically affected the quality of the water in the river. Thus, the water quality, which was 100% fit for human consumption some 100 years ago, has decreased to 50% if not less in present day scenario. And if this is not controlled, then soon the condition may arise that the water quality may reduce to 20% or even less. This is a potential hazard leading to the disaster. This also arises a question that if national river of such importance is being subjugated to such a fate, then the conditions of other water bodies are much more grim and dangerous. Apart from the above cases, as shown on the screen, even the static water bodies have become frothy, and this froth increases in volume and it is engulfing the settlements as well as bringing transportation to stand still. Additionally, it is also creating respirational disorders in the population in and around the settlements. To counter this situation so that the hazard does not turn into disaster, two acts has been formulated. The first one, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, and second one, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Rules in 1975. The scenario does not rest with water alone. The contaminants are present in air and can create health hazard for the community at large. Air pollution can be of two types, namely occupational and community air pollution. When a person is exposed to potentially hazardous concentration of vapors, gases, etc. due to their working environment, it is known as occupational air pollution. On the other hand, community air pollution involves pollution from variety of sources, contaminants and factors which adversely affect social, economic and health of the population at large. The air quality of most of the Indian cities has been rendered bad, as it is evident from the increase in health disorders in general. This is due to number 1, rampant urbanization, secondly industrialization, thirdly vehicular emissions, to name a few. There are many more reasons other than these three. The pollution, in addition to persisting cold weather during winter, aggravates the problem, as in case of our national capital Delhi. The air quality of the city has been so drastically affected that almost in every winter we have delays and cancellations of flight, trains, etc. This is being counter-checked by implementing various reductions in vehicular emissions, release of stag gas, avoiding burning of crop residue and so on. To counter-check this so that the situation does not convert into disaster, the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981 and the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Rules of 1982 were brought into action. The gaseous pollutants widely dispersed in the air are easily absorbed in large quantities by the trees, that is vegetation, and oceans. Thus, the oceans and vegetation form the sink. The gaseous pollutants like sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide diffuse to the surface of the ocean and are finally absorbed in its bulk. This removes large quantity of pollutants from the atmosphere. Similarly, plants, trees and other vegetation also take up atmospheric pollutants and have ability to drastically minimize the burden of the pollutants from the atmosphere. This creates an optimum balance for sustaining healthy atmosphere. The trees not only help in mitigating the air pollution to a large extent, but also helps in preventing loss of fertility and maintains the nutrient balance of the soil. Moreover, roots of the trees prevent soil erosion and consequently landslide. Hence, it is of utmost importance that more trees are planted and taken care of. Thus, they play a multidimensional role in striking balance in the ecosystem. The environmental hazard is generally enhanced by extensive felling of trees leading to deforestation. Deforestation seems to be the easy solution to increase the agricultural land to support the ever increasing demand of food. Deforestation is also done in the name of urbanization and industrialization, which plays a havoc on forest conservation. Forests are also exploited for timbers, minerals and other products. This increases vulnerability of the environment. Thus, Forest Conservation Act of 1980 and Forest Conservation Rules of 2003 were brought into play to conserve the forest cover of the country. The forest is inhabited by myriad types of animals, birds, reptiles and insects. These animals are of two main types, namely herbivore, that is plant eating, and the carnivores, those are flesh eating animals. The herbivores feed on the plants and carnivores on herbivores. If the number of carnivores dwindle, then the number of herbivores would increase, as there would be no check on the population of the latter. This could result in overgrazing and ultimately desertification. On the other hand, if the number of carnivores increase, then there would be a chance of increase in animal-human conflict. This would probably be due to lack of the food for the carnivores in the forest cover, and human beings are easy prey. They are defenseless and quite vulnerable in front of wild animals. Thus, each animal and plant is significant in its own rights. One species cannot be replaced by the other. The wild animals are poached for their hides, meat, bones, tusks, etc., or for sheer pleasure of games, entertainment or financial gain. This creates an environmental imbalance resulting in a hazard and which may finally culminate in a disaster. To prevent this from creating an imbalance, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 has been proposed, with a view to protect the animals in their natural habitats. Thus, in an ecosystem as shown on the screen, the plants form the primary producers, that is, they supply the primary food to the herbivores, that is, the plant eating animals like deer, etc., which in turn forms food for the carnivores, that is, the flesh eating animals like lion, tigers, etc. Carnivores are the top consumers. The carnivores, herbivores and producers, when die, are decayed by the various microorganisms and the nutrients are returned back to the soil. These microorganisms are called as decomposers. They maintain the fertility of the soil. An ecosystem is considered to be healthy and thriving only if its top consumers prevail in sufficient number without creating human-animal conflict. Hence, the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 was projected with the main objective of conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components and fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of utilization of genetic resources. The decline in environmental quality is quite evident by increasing pollution, loss of vegetal cover and biological diversity, excessive concentration of harmful chemicals in the ambient atmosphere and in food chains, growing risk of environmental accidents and threat to life support systems. To avert these hazards from turning into disaster, Environment Protection Act of 1986 and Environment Protection Rules of 1986 are implemented. Thus, the cases related to environmental issues are legally covered. Further, to expedite disposal of cases relating to environmental protection, conservation of forests and other natural resources, National Green Tribunal Act of 2010 was enacted. All the above acts pertaining to ecosystem, environment in general and forests are being supervised by the Ministry of Environment and Forests at Government of India level. The Disaster Management Act of 2005 was formulated to prevent the environmental hazards from turning into disaster. It also provides constitution of a number of institutions at national, state and district level. At national level, the Act establishes the National Disaster Management Authority headed by the Prime Minister, and the model is replicated at state level with state disaster management authorities. The above aspect of Disaster Management Act and other established acts are enumerated below. The above aspect of Disaster Management Act and other established acts as enumerated below are formulated to ensure that disasters are controlled rather than action being taken after it strikes. The acts and the rules which pertain to the above aspects are the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act 2001, Food Safety and Standards Act of 2006, Cultural Heritage Conservation Bill of 2010, Wetlands Conservation and Management Rules 2010, Coastal Regulation Zone Notification of 2011, Municipal Solid Waste Management and Handling Rules 2000, Epidemic Disease Act of 1897. Apart from environmental disasters, there are various incidents which take place due to the industrialization. Hence, let us look into some of the industrial disasters. Industrialization is synonymous to development of a nation. The pollutants possess major health hazard. If a person is exposed to the pollutants as a part of his or her job, like attendance of petrol pumps to petrol or diesel fumes, or quartz dust as in glass factories during crushing and grinding of the raw materials and so on, are termed as occupational exposure. Apart from this exposure, there are impending disasters at various workplaces. As an example of disaster at workplaces, the mining disaster that occurred at Chasnala near Dhanbad in 1975, killing 372 miners, is an apt case as a study. Such mine disasters are not new. In fact, the recent rat hole mining, which created national news in Meghalaya, is an eye-opener to indicate how sluggishly we have been implementing our laws. However, notwithstanding this factor, the following acts and rules have been framed for ensuring safety at working place. Some of the laws are Coal Mines Regulation of 1957, Metalliferous Mines Regulation of 1961, Oil Mines Regulation of 1984, the Mines Act of 1952, Mines Rule of 1955, Mines Vocational Training Rules of 1966, Mines Scratch Rules of 1966, Mines Rescue Rules of 1985, Electricity Act of 2003, Factories Act of 1948, Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemical Rules of 1989, that is under Environmental Protection Act of 1986, Land Acquisition Mines Act 1885, Coal Mines Conservation and Development Act of 1974. Now, let us consider another case of industrial disaster, the world's one of the worst chemical disaster, where methyl isocyanate gas leaked from Union Carbide plant in the city of Bhopal in 1984. This incident killed 3,200 people, if not more. Thousands suffered irreversible health damage and were maimed for life. The immediate cause of accident was failure of cooling unit, leakage of water into the tank and failure of several safety devices, leading to massive release of the chemical. If a pollutant remains confined to the plant premises, it is known as on-site emergency. It is then the responsibility of the factory or the industry administration to deal with the matter. But if this pollutant spreads to the surrounding areas beyond the plant boundary, affecting settlements or environment, then it is known as off-site emergency. At this juncture, civil administration comes into play. This is a classic case which shows how industries using toxic material contribute to environmental hazard and in turn turning it to a disaster. This gives rise to the point of disaster planning to ensure such emergencies do not occur. In order to strengthen this point, we have the rules and regulations enacted by the Parliament as shown on the screen. First one, the Bhopal gas leak disaster, Processing of the Claims Act of 1985, Calcium Carbide Rules of 1987, Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemical Rules of 1989, Chemical Accidents, Emergency Planning, Preparedness and Response Rules of 1996, Major Accident Hazard Control Rules of 1997. Apart from the above, hazardous chemicals and liquids are also transported by road and rails, and majority of these chemicals fall in the toxic category. The hazardous substances can be classified into various classes such as explosives, compressed gases, flammable liquids, flammable solids, oxidizers, poisons, radioactive substances, corrosives, other regulated materials. Generally, most of the goods carrier carrying hazardous goods are flammable petroleum products, including kerosene, petrol, LPG, naphtha, etc. The movement of these substances are more accident prone. In case of accident, it may cause fire, explosion, injuries, apart from loss of property and environmental pollution. Thus, the safety codes and safety requirements should be followed in transportation of these hazardous materials. During transportation of hazardous substances, appropriate and distinct class labels should be displayed on the goods carrier carrying the hazardous substance. Appropriate and distinct class labels should be displayed on every package containing dangerous or hazardous goods. If packages contain substances which represent more than one hazard, then such packages should display distinct labels to indicate the hazards. Every goods carrier carrying hazardous substance should be fitted with a tachograph and a spark arrestor. The various class labels depicting these 9 classes of hazardous substances are as shown on the screen. The class labels should be displayed such that they are distinctly visible. The class label should be so positioned that side of the label is at an angle of 45 degree to the vertical side. The size of the label should not be less than 25 mm square, which may be divided into two portions, the upper half reserved for the pictorial symbol and the lower half for the test. It is the responsibility of the consignor that the goods carriage has valid registration to carry the hazardous goods. Vehicle should be equipped with necessary first aid, safety equipments and antidotes as may be required. Transporter of the goods carrier has full and adequate information about the dangerous or hazardous substances being transported. Driver of the goods carrier should be trained in handling the dangers posed during transport of such substances. Every consignor should supply the owner of the goods carrier full and adequate information about the dangerous substances being transported, so as to enable such owner and its driver to create awareness of the safety rules for the transportation of the hazardous material and to make them aware of the risks created by such goods to the health or safety of any person. It is the responsibility of the transporter to ensure that the goods carrier has valid registration and permit and is safe for transportation of the said goods. Apart from the consignor, transporter should also ensure that the vehicle is equipped with necessary first aid, safety equipment, toolbox and antidotes as may be required to contain any accident. The transporter should satisfy himself that information given by the consignor is full and accurate. Transporter should also ensure that driver being deputed for transportation is trained to handle and transport such hazardous materials. The owner of goods carrier carrying hazardous substances and the consigner of such goods shall lay down the route for each trip. The owner of goods carrier should ensure that the driver holds a driving license. It is mandatory that the driver should be able to read and write at least one Indian language apart from English. The driver should have successfully passed a course connected with transport of hazardous substances. It is the responsibility of the driver to keep all information provided to him in writing, that is, in form of TREM card, that is, Transport Emergency Card, as shown on the screen. This card is to be kept in driver's cabin and should be available at all times while hazardous material related to it is being transported. Government of India has produced a booklet of such materials and has also enacted the following rules for its implementation. The Static and Mobile Pressure Vessels Unfired Rules of 1981, Hazardous Waste Management and Handling Rules of 1989, the Gas Cylinder Rules of 2004, Hazardous Wastes Management, Handling and Transboundary Movement Rules of 2008. Thus, coming to the end of this lecture, in this lecture the various aspects so far enumerated pertaining to environmental disaster and protection has been done to give a fair idea as to what is environmental factor, what pertains to its disaster, rules and regulations for controlling the same, so that the environmental degradation which is a threat to human race is controlled. Else we may have to pay a heavy penalty in form of environmental disaster. Hence the idiom, prevention is better than cure. So, let us all unite and come together to prevent environment and ecological disaster by contributing to the nature, if not in a big way, then at least in our own small ways. Thank you for your patient listening.